Okay, let's get started. So today is the 99th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we've been here every Tuesday and Thursday. Sometimes we varied it, like this week, we're on a Wednesday, where we've been examining a subject of relevance to the security world. And the idea of thought leadership is that we critique today what's going on in order that we get a better type of security in the future. And today, our topic is one that was actually suggested by one of our former panelists, and it's been on the agenda for quite a while. And for those of you who've attended the previous 99 or 98, I know will know this already, the subject of the Darknet, offenders' idea of paradise. What are the implications for security? And I know many of us find the Darknet quite scary, and I think with justification. And so what I've done, once again, is invited in along 3 experts to give their views on this subject matter. And as is usual, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will then invite each of them to make an opening statement, 3 minutes, where they get to say whatever they want to about this subject matter. And then I'll come to you, the audience, for questions and discussion. Now, this is a subject about which there is much conversation and maybe a lot of concern. So here's your chance today. Please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Please get your questions in early, and I will endeavour to incorporate it into the ensuing discussion. So without further ado then, let's meet our panellists. And once again, we've got another distinguished lineup. And let's start off with Gary. Gary, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name's Gary Hibbert, and I'm the Professor of Communicating Cyber for Cyberfort. I have spent the last 35 years in IT and 20 of those in cybersecurity and information governance.
Thank you very much indeed. And from Gary to Pauline.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Hi, I'm Pauline Norstrom. I'm the founder and CEO of Anacanta Consulting, a strategic advisory company working with global clients to bring AI to a number of high-risk industries responsibly and ethically. Over the last 20 years, I've held entrepreneurial and board leadership roles in global technology organizations, developing video and analytics solutions in the physical security domain. I'm also a former chair of the board of the BSIA, and have led and contributed to a number of digital and ethical standards in the physical and cyber security domains. So back to you,
Pauline, thank you very much indeed. And finally, let's go and meet Victoria. Victoria, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Victoria Wang. I'm a reader in security and cybercrime from the Institute for Criminal Justice Studies, University of Portsmouth. Currently, my research covers cybersecurity and information security management, social theory and theoretical criminology. In particular, I have been working on security threats and management measures in different types of organizations, cybersecurity in various countries like Nigeria, South Korea, and Vietnam, and of course, in different networks, such as the Darknet. I've been working on trust, identity, privacy, and security with the EPSRC's large project. I have been working on the HM government's cybersecurity budget survey for the past 4 years, and also the victim of computer misuse crime. That's what I have been doing for the past 6 years.
Thank you very much indeed, Victoria. What you didn't say, Victoria, is that you're writing the chapter on the Darknet for the forthcoming Handbook of Security. So now I read it, and I can tell you that is alarming. Okay, so without further ado then, you've met the panelists. Let's go to each of them for their opening statement. 3 minutes when we get to hear what they've got to say, their thoughts on this topic. Gary, your opening statement, please.
The dark web, the Darknet, is something that is misunderstood by a lot of people. We hear people talk about the deep web, and the dark web is almost as if they're the same thing. My concern is that many security professionals aren't sure about the distinction themselves. But when people do finally manage to get to the dark web, and they use something like Tor, they know that it's a place that they can go and find information about perhaps their companies or about hacks that have happened. They aren't aware of some of the implications, the deeper implications to themselves and to their teams as well. There's a lot on the dark web which people don't truly understand. there are risks to themselves that they may step into areas and see things that damages them personally. It may trigger something in them, and we need to understand the true implications to us as individuals and as teams, as well as what we're going and searching for. And I think whilst we may to some degree understand the technology, what we don't really understand is the psychology behind the dark web as well.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Gary. I'm sure we're going to come back on some of those issues in the discussion. Let's go to Pauline, and Pauline, your opening statement, please.
Certainly. So the question is the darknet the offender's idea of paradise? Well, I think we are led to believe that it is, but the darknet is simply a hidden internet of web pages accessed through a special web browser. You know, as Gary has mentioned, you need a Tor browser, such as Firefox, to access the darknet. Using the darknet itself is not actually illegal. It's just a private network. And to add to its legitimacy, when it was founded, it was partly funded by the US government to enable them to securely exchange information. And in 2010, the Tor project actually received a Free Software Foundation's award for societal benefit by enabling roughly 36 million people around the world to experience freedom of access and expression on the internet, while keeping them in control of their privacy and anonymity. The way the Tor browser works, it connects to the internet using multiple nodes, which encrypt the data at each hop. And this generates a new IP address, which can never be traced back to the source. This structure is what enables the darknet to remain dark. People do legitimately use Tor to browse the surface web, so what we can all see normally. And Facebook and other social media providers have even produced Tor versions. But for those who operate illegal activities, the veil of security and anonymity offered by Tor must seem like an attractive means of covertly trading the products of crimes such as cybersecurity attacks using cryptocurrency. Some companies make it really easy, though, for cyber criminals. And in a recent case prosecuted by the UK's Information Commissioner, British Airways was fined the maximum fine of £20 million for failing to protect the data of its customers. But security is getting more sophisticated. Advanced detection tools help cybersecurity professionals to determine whether a company email has been breached by trawling the dark net. And deep learning and AI come into play because they can be used to constantly monitor for critical data breaches. And monitoring allows fast action to be taken, such as changing passwords. And an out-of-date password, of course, holds no value to a criminal. To be successful as a criminal operating on the dark net, they have to be exceptionally careful never to reveal their true identity, which connects them to the physical world. But even cryptocurrency transactions are recorded on a public ledger. So in theory, with the right tools, it could be possible to identify a criminal's transaction. But human behavior is usually the weak link, whether it's security vulnerabilities designed into products or simple operating procedures not being followed. The human factors which lead to a data breach, such as insecure passwords, are the very factors which can also result in criminals being outed on the darknet too. Also, the darknet has been infiltrated by law enforcement who operate without detection. So is it a paradise? I think not really, but it's still very difficult to trace and prosecute criminals who sell illegal data or ransomware through the darknet. And companies' vulnerabilities will reduce if they take a responsible approach. They must have cybersecurity on the board agenda, ensure the right policies and training are in place, and finally, to treat their data as an asset of the business before it becomes a liability. So that's all from me. Back to you, Martin.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Fantastic. Okay, just to say to the audience, if you'd like to get your questions in using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, all your discussion points, we'll endeavour to get to these as soon as we can. So question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Let's hear from our final panelist and her opening statement. Victoria, over to you.
Hello. Technologically, the internet is actually three-layered. The first one is the World Wide Web, and that's we know as something that is indexed and accessible, which means everybody can use Firefox, Google, and Chrome, and then search for something. The thing has been indexed. Imagine the books with barcodes in the library. You know the code, you can find the information. So it's indexed and accessible. Next layer will be the deep web. You have things that are accessible but not indexed. Imagine the books that's not barcoded in the basement of your university's library. They're there. If you know where to find it, you can find it, but you can't Google and find it unless you know the exact address. Most of that are court statements in America or old library information or information that's too new and your search engine hasn't been able to index it yet. The third one is the darknet. We have information that's not indexed, vast quantity of things in the basement of your library, and the access to it is restricted, which means you need a special browser to find things. And usually we do with the Onion browser. And that's the three-layered nature. And that's why the darknet is dark. I don't like the word darknet. Henceforth, many years ago, not that many years ago, I did a project about 4 years ago. It was published about 2.5 years ago, called The Not So Dark Side of the Darknet. I want to study the sociological reason behind people's participation of the darknet. I want to find out whether the technological structure of the darknet has enabled it to be intrinsically criminogenic, which means a fertile ground for criminal activity to flourish. I found out a lot of things which are quite interesting, actually. I found out that the darknet is not that underground. Most of my participants said they heard about the darknet from their teachers in schools and universities. And it's not illegal, of course. And they said the darknet's anonymity provided freedom of expression. They said the darknet is not a society on its own. It's not separated because our psychology is not separated. We still have our rules and norms from the real world. I will bring that into the darknet. So darknet cannot take over the real world. It is threatening, but psychologically, it may not be as threatening as it has been portrayed. This is from this particular research. And they also said the drug haven, Silk Road, may have been used as a tool for propaganda by certain governments. They named the US government. And they said the darknet does not intrinsically breed criminal activity. People bring good and bad things onto the darknet. This is a piece of research I did a few years ago called The Not So Dark Side of the Darknet, also published in Martin's Security Journal. But of course, they said, although the darknet may not be as dark as most people think, this still presents a serious security challenge due to its unique characteristics, such as anonymity, virtual markets, and use of cryptocurrency. And also governments, as citizens, we may think we can access the darknet for free, but governments may not feel the same way. Recently, I have done a piece of research called Brands on the Darknet, in which we have investigated different kinds of valuable British brands and how they have been abused on the darknet, and that's shocking. I entered some of the popular markets in the darknet, for example, the Dream Market and Wall Street markets. Immediately, I found out 19 out of the 50 brands were seriously abused, especially banking and finance markets. And Martin has seen the pictures, the images. I took screenshots. It's shocking. There are sales of statements and other bank and financial institutions letters, templates, and credit cards. Sales of credit card details, personal information, account numbers, sort codes, and credit reports. Sales of statements, other banks, financial institutions, letters, and templates. And sales of general personal information of customers. We also have abuse of Tesco. How can Tesco be abused? Very simple. There are drugs that's being branded Tesco and being sold on the dark net. And we also have sales of personal information, those who are working for critical infrastructures. We also have sales of hacked customer accounts. So the abuse of brands is very, very serious on the dark net. And then I have just submitted a proposal to my university to carry out the second piece of research on this called Brands on the Darknet 2.0. And I want to further investigate 2 years later whether the situation is better. And then we found out that a lot of governments, especially the Belgian and German government, have been cracking down the darknet. So some of the very popular markets, such as the dark market, has been shut. But all those are temporary. There are still very, very, very active markets alive on the dark net. And some markets die, others will be born immediately. So there seems to be no way we can control the dark net. But on the other hand, do we want to control the darknet? Currently, the police are working out different way to catch criminals on the darknet. If we don't know you have committed crime, it's hard to prove you have. But if we suspect you have committed crime, then we may be able to work out and find evidence to incriminate you. There are ways, technically. But if we shut the darknet, are we pushing the criminals onto a new ground, which we have no knowledge of? And that is my quandary. That's also something I said to a newspaper interview, a German radio interview about 2 years ago. Should we control the darknet? Should we make it disappear and give criminals a new venue to exercise their intelligence? And that is my question to myself and to the audience.
Yeah, well, good, very good question. Very good question. Well, thank you very much indeed. Just say to the audience, do join in question and answers on the question and answer button, and we'll endeavour to involve you in the webinar. Gary, let me come back to you. I'm interested in something that you said, Gary, in your opening statement, which was about risks in getting involved on the internet. Okay, now I can understand that I suppose it's those risks which keep me off it. I'm scared, but as the others have said, the dangers of not doing so, if you're an organisation, can be quite severe too, can't they? I mean, there is this balance between the risk of what people might find if they do, and the dangers of what they might miss if they don't. Gary? Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, you know, we do need to use the dark web. It's been said really well by Pauline and Victoria that, you know, it is legal to go and use the dark web. We need to be able to use it as researchers. We need to use it as cybersecurity professionals and practitioners. We need to learn about the new hacks and attack vectors. We need to look at you know, our own organizations through the filter of the dark web. But my concern is that, as I've said to people many times, and it's actually Victoria said there, it's unstructured. So you have to know how to navigate your way around this world. It's not like Google where you get your nice links and it's filtered and it's controlled. When you go to the dark web, you could be clicking one link that will take you to some imagery that will stay with you forever, and you may be clicking on something else which will just go to a dead end. So you have to learn to navigate in these worlds as well. So that's my concern. When I talk about risks, I am linking very much the technology to the human side of things. And I think about the teams and the people who operate in these areas and do the research. You know, what care are we putting on those individuals? I have seen the real world impact on police officers who have worked in this space, who had to operate in some of the deepest, darkest areas of the dark web, and the psychological impacts upon them. So all I'm saying here when I talk about risk is, yes, absolutely, we should be going in, we should be learning, we should understand you know, what is there, but also with a full recognition of what you know, our teams and our team's safety. Yeah, I mean, in a different way, Pauline, you made this point about human behaviour being the weak link. I mean, a slightly different take on this, and I guess it's this point, isn't it, that there's a strange dichotomy, as Gary says, right? That we need to be careful in the way that we use it, because it could be dangerous. If you get your staff on this and they're not prepared, it could be serious. What's the balance between? How do you achieve a balance between those two quite opposing aims or dangers?
Yeah, I think it's a very serious issue, because you can't unsee something.
No.
Yeah, and you know, that can cause you know, all sorts of problems long term for people. The balance, the blend needs to be that of investigatory, so the humans knowing where these things might reside, but also blending the human interaction with the use of AI technology, which has advanced substantially in terms of being able to identify you know, dangerous images, for example, so that people don't have to look at them. And when used together, there's potential for this to become safer for investigators to actually go and pinpoint the sources, you know, of some of this material. And, you know, the dark web, or the dark net now, maybe we should call it the second internet, because, you know, for those of us who, you know, were researching and understanding the internet pre-Google, you know, in the 90s, when I first started learning about it, it was interesting. I'd learned about it through reading magazines that were published about the internet. And to actually go on the internet, you had to have the web addresses. You know, there were no search engines as such. It's almost like that again. And, you know, potentially, you know, a blend of technology and human investigation is the way forward, in particular AI.
Okay, thank you. Victoria, let me come to you, and maybe I'll get Gary's view on this afterwards as well. Peter French has asked the point about the role of governments in the internet. You mentioned this, Victoria, in your opening statement. And I guess it's about the extent and the way that governments are involved, and what's a good role for a government and what's a bad role for a government, and perhaps examples of each.
Well, it is very hard to say, really, because the way the darknet is controlled is like the internet in some other countries. A bad way of the government is, as some of the participants in the darknet said in one of the pieces of research, is control. And then to shut down the darknet, they don't really like it. One of the good ways the government can do is to regulate. I think what the residents in the darknet want, especially the forum participants, if they go in there to find a community and to retreat from the modern world, what they want is a bit of nurturing, really, and they want to feel a sense of belonging in their community, and they rather prefer self-regulation than government regulation. So the government, if the government can play the role of a custodian, and they'll be much more welcome than play the role of the police. That's the feedback from the residents in the darknet forums that I interviewed a few years ago.
I mean, the thing is, Victoria, just so that I'm clear, can you regulate the dark? I don't know what to call it now. The second internet. I think I'll take Pauline's idea. Can you regulate it?
Well, in a way you can, because the dark market, which was the largest market, the most active market on the darknet, has been shut. And the Wall Street market, the one identified in the chapter wrote for you, has been shut. So the government is regulating it in a hard way. I mean, some of the governments are regulating in a hard way. And you can reflect back on the internet. When the internet first started, it was the most unregulated place. You know, it's like taking over. It is a freedom of mind. Take your giant hands away from our internet. That was a speech made by one of the founders of the internet. But within my lifetime, I mean, I've been studying cybersecurity for 17 years. And within that 17 years, it's become the most regulated space on earth. You have the community norms, you have the regional norms, you have the laws, and you also have international laws. So from moral laws to legal laws and to international treaties, everything is upon the internet, and that's how it's developed in 17 years. When the internet was first regulated, it started from vigilante justice in cyber community forums, and that's what the darknet residents want the darknet to be regulated now. So what is the difference?
Interesting. Well, let's go to Gary. Gary, I'm interested in your point on this idea of regulating it in some way. What's your take on what Victoria said?
I think it's an interesting one, and I would agree to a point with you, Victoria. And I think there's almost a distinction between regulated and policed. I think there's a lot of certainly on the, you know, again, we're going to use Pauline's example here on the surface web, the first web, we have lots of regulations. Does everybody adhere to them? No, we know they don't. In terms of the dark web, the second internet, can it be regulated? I don't think it can. It can be policed, and of course there's law enforcement on there, but we've got to remember that both the internet, deep, dark, or otherwise, was meant for information sharing, and certainly the whole point of Tor, when it was first created, was to share information in a secure way. It was created, as we said, by, as Pauline said, by the US Navy SEALs, and they created it so that they could communicate securely with their operatives in the field. But the problem with that was quite clearly, if someone was monitoring what was going on, you know, if you're talking from point A to point Z and it's just a clear line, well, then someone's going to be able to spot that. So the easiest way for that to be obscured was to let Tor out and let everybody use it. It becomes unregulated. It becomes something that anybody can use. So anybody can download and install it, and you know, and use that. The ironic thing I think about the dark web is that there is a trust model there, which is you know, is difficult to break. Once you buy something from someone on the dark web and they've established trust and they've established that you aren't law enforcement, etc., then you know, it's you know, that is a very secure bond. So can it be regulated? I genuinely don't think it can be, because it was never meant to be. Can it be policed? Yes, it is being policed as we speak. So there you go. That's my.
But okay, Guy. Is it, just very quickly, is it being policed well?
No, because police aren't collaborating. You know, we try to. You know, I speak in schools, and as many fellow professionals probably do, and children will say to us, well, can't we just close down the dark web? Can't we just shut it down? Can't we shut the bad stuff down? Well, you would love to, but when we are dealing with a police force that is ill-equipped, ill-trained, and ill-resourced, and on international levels, it's virtually impossible to be able to police it at that level.
Yeah, okay. I mean, and Pauline, here perhaps is the dilemma, right? It's difficult to regulate and can't be policed that easily. So perhaps it is a paradise. There's my case. I'll just pick up 2 points Victoria and Gary has said.
Well, it may well be, but this is so the whole regulatory issue, you know, we're assuming that the regulators are the good guys, and that's where this model falls down. I think the trust element, you know, that Gary's brought into this is very important, but fundamentally, and you know, this might be a controversial thing to say, but I know you like controversy, Martin.
I do.
But ultimately, you know, all of this stuff runs on something. You know, it runs on hardware, and you know, the way to get to it, as we've seen in, you know, actually in the security industry, and the use of common chipsets, you know, for various things, the hardware could be regulated, you know, and that unfortunately would be a way of potentially opening up, you know, the darknet. I'm not saying it's been done or there's any plan to do that, but knowing what I know about limited knowledge I have about, you know, silicon, it's, if you can imagine it, it's probably possible.
Why is that particularly controversial? Because
it would prevent the darknet from operating, because it would be anonymous.
Okay. All right, let's go to Victoria. A question from Simon Cham. And as has been said, the internet's being infiltrated, Victoria. So are the criminals still comfortable on the darknet? I mean, isn't that quite a dangerous world to be in, where you can't see what's going on, so you can't see where law enforcement is coming from?
It is quite dangerous for the criminals, and obviously the whole platform, as Pauline said, it is a technological platform. The whole platform can be seized and shut when you're in the middle of conducting a business. So you may lose your money for criminals. But the monetary gain is huge. So they don't want to take the risk. Basic criminological theory, they want to take the risk because, again, potential gain is huge. And also, I mean, as Pauline said, the darknet, the internet was built on the system of trust. When we were hackers, well, when some people were hackers, they're known for their handle. Okay, they may be arrested for the police, they were released, they don't change their handle because that's their trust model. I mean, for example, if I'm Victoria, my handle is Vic. I wouldn't change my handle for 25 years. You can still find a Vic in certain communities. When I was a teenager, for example, that's my handle. I can't change it. That's my trust system. For criminals, it's the same. I say a hacker offering his service on the darknet, and he can't change his handle because that's his name. So yeah, they feel the danger and they are scared. But as darknet is a very it's like, almost like a Bitcoin. It is very unstable and changes very fast. One moment the market is shut. Next day they may be alive again. And it's unpredictable, and that's the risk they take. And that's the excitement they get out of it.
Yeah, okay. It's one of these big things. In fact, tomorrow, I should say. On our
is a lifestyle.
Right. So I was about to say, Victoria, tomorrow, on our 100th webinar tomorrow at 3:30 UK time, we have 2 ex-offenders coming in to talk about their life of crime. And they're going to make this point, right, that there's a bit of excitement there and it can be lucrative. And you don't get caught very often. Trouble is, when you do, it's a bit miserable, but most of the time you don't. And I guess it's even, Gary, there is this point, I'm keen to come to you on this point, because Simon Chan raises a good point in his question here. This strikes me as a very interesting opportunity and dilemma for offenders, because isn't there a real opportunity here to change the emphasis, the risk-reward ratio for offenders? Because if they can't see what's coming against them, therein lies an opportunity for law enforcement, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I talk about the trust model earlier, and this is, I often say to people, and this may sound controversial, and I may not, I often say to people, if you want to see good customer service and how it works, go to the dark web and buy something. Because I promise you, if you are seen as a trusted individual, if you buy something off the dark web and they think for 1 second that you aren't law enforcement and that they're not going to get arrested, you will be able to have a really good relationship with them. If you have a complaint, they will deal with it promptly and they will serve you extremely well. But this trust model is really difficult to establish. So there is that element of the rules of the internet. There are 100 rules of the internet. Most of us know 1 or 2 of them, but one of the rules on the internet is that every woman is a man and every child that you're speaking to is a law enforcement agent. So they recognize themselves that there's very little trust, and they don't know who they're talking to and who they're talking with. So law enforcement do use that obscurity and the smoke and mirrors to be able to appear bigger than they actually are on the dark web. So yes, it can be used to great effect. But for me, the issue really is just this idea of being able to try and regulate it, and I genuinely don't think it will ever be regulated. Interesting.
Okay. I mean, just very quickly, Radek Havlis has said, on this issue of regulation, just one final point, if I might. Is there presumably there's the lack of political will to regulate it, and aren't we seeing here some sort of conflict of interest on the one hand, between wanting to and not wanting to?
Yeah, very succinctly. Yeah, I think that there is difficulty in all of that, and there has to be a will to regulate. And let's be honest, getting this world in which we live, getting them to agree on one thing is going to be difficult. Imagine, look at what's happened with the General Data Protection Regulation. Can you imagine trying to do that for the entire world and then try and take that deeper into the dark web and get everybody who are keen to have their own privacy with upheld and such? There has to be a will, and it would be very unpopular to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to come to Victoria, then you, Pauline, on this one, please. Sean Wilson, Victoria, has asked this question. Do you have a view about the rise of e-commerce sites on the darknet and the connected rise of denial of service attack? And of course, you've looked at e-commerce activity on the internet specifically, and you've published on it, Victoria. So let me come to you first with that angle, and then perhaps to Pauline from the commercial side. Victoria first.
I mean, adding to Gary's point, e-commerce side is really flourishing on the darknet because the extent of customer service. Whatever you can find on Amazon, you can have exactly the same service on the darknet, and the even better. So you can buy passports, fake passports. You can have all sorts of services, from killing top 10 politicians to different kind of hacking services. Whatever you can think, you can find that service on the darknet. So it is flourishing, and it's very hard to control and regulate. And you do get really good customer feedback for you to gain a sense of trust. For example, when I went into darknet, look for a service, and I look at the thousands of ratings and all the 5-star ratings, and I literally give very detailed feedback. The description of the service, description of the product, and the customer will be rating it after having that service. So they are trying their very best to build trust. They're doing it better than Amazon in some cases. So yes, it is flourishing, and then it's very hard to control or regulate.
And what about the denial of service? I mean, I guess that's the
denials of service attack is mostly a bunch of hackers. If you want to carry out, for example, denial of service attacks against a university or a certain organization, you go into darknet. But those kind of hiring, maybe you may have to go through authentication services. For example, a layperson going to darknet ask for the service, you may not be allowed to be in the community because those hackers are top hackers. There are some of them are organized hacking groups, organized criminals, because criminals also use darknet forums as a place to change ideas and also find accomplices. So if you want to hire top criminals to perform denial of service attacks, you may have to spend lots of time on the darknet to prove that you're not from the police. And then you'll be allowed to enter the deep layer of the darknet forums in order to be connected to those who will be providing you with services.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just your thoughts on this, Pauline, from a more commercial angle, perhaps.
Well, what Victoria's saying is very compelling, isn't it, in terms of building trust with a buyer. So you can't kind of argue with that, from a commercial perspective, because the customers actually dictate, don't they? More so. We've heard all the stories about fake NPS, inflated Net Promoter Score. So that's the user vote on Amazon when you go and rate the products. So can we trust that? So if anything, e-commerce on the dark net, if it's not, illicit materials, it might actually be better. And, who's to say it's not? But the denial of service, any kind of, virus, ransomware, these softwares originate within these groups, and that's where you go and buy them. But fundamentally, to prevent a denial of service attack, you have to have really good cybersecurity policies and make good choices when it comes to hardware. And that's the way to stop it. And then there isn't just a freely available attack surface, for one of these attacks to be executed from. So I don't think there's a panacea to any of this, but awareness and education, goes a long way. And I hope what we're talking about today is helping those who have this responsibility.
Well, it's an interesting point. Thank you very much indeed. Let me come to Gary here. Gary, a question from Keith Nielsen, in fact, very much along Pauline's line of thought. Says it's a very informative discussion. What advice can we give companies to try to protect themselves other than strict protocols for all system users? And does the proliferation of Zoom type meeting sites have extra dangers? Gary, does it?
Okay, yes. The proliferation of using Zoom and such, I often say that the biggest risk that we all face is ignorance and complacency. And we can remove one of those quite easily by education. So I'm a real advocate of training and awareness, make people aware of the impact that they have on organizations. It's not about policy and just having documents around. You've got to educate people. And I mean that not in a patronizing way. I'm talking about making sure that, I love the phrase that Perry Carpenter has coined, which is, just because I'm aware doesn't mean I care. So when you can educate people so that they understand the personal impact that they have on cybersecurity, then they're much more likely to bring that into the workplace and make sure that things are protected. from a technical point of view, it's get the basics right. It is making sure that you have good patch management processes and protocols in place, that you not only have those in place, but that you have somebody who is checking to make sure that your systems are secure. So whether that be looking at vulnerability assessments, pen testing, that kind of thing. Making sure that you've got the basics right, I think, is, for me, absolutely key. I always say to people, look, you've got to put security on the agenda before it becomes the agenda. And I think if you can start to do that and give people room to grow and to breathe into this, then it's not quite as scary as it all seems, and it doesn't need to be complex.
Very helpful, actually. Thank you very much indeed. Victoria, I'm going to come to you and ask you to be fairly brief because we're running out of time. And Ms. Hayes says, basically, I mean, the question is, why is there a lack of cooperation amongst law enforcement? I mean, why?
Oh, well, there are many reasons. Law enforcement are usually very protective of the intelligence, for example. So the nature is not to collaborate with law enforcement from different countries. And also, the police of the internet itself is very complicated. Traditionally, we're talking about globalization and global control and collaboration, but nowadays it's evident it's not working. Nowadays, we have a really weird situation of localization. So we have the local governments, for example, certain countries have their firewalls, and we can penetrate, and then they have their own rules and regulations. And then we have the local governments, and then we have the global companies such as Microsoft, Google, and Huawei. So it's the global companies controlling the internet plus the local governments policing of the internet. And how are they going to collaborate, especially in the current political climate? Who is going to be calling for collaboration and get into trouble?
Well, yeah, but without it, though, I mean, this just plays into the hands of the offender in a massively big way, doesn't it?
Well, there are even darker side to it. I mean, some of the activity might even be state-sponsored, for example. I have to stop right here.
Well, it wouldn't surprise many of us, perhaps, in some cases. Just very quickly, Victoria, because Stuart Vardy's got a question along this very line. Could the unpredictability you describe be used to the advantage of law enforcement? I mean, this very fact that it's all unpredictable, that's another advantage to law enforcement here.
Okay, we're talking about machine learning, adversary learning, almost artificial intelligence, for example. And you imagine two different machines learn from each other's performance. You're attacking, they're attacking, we're defending, they're attacking, we're defending. Usually it's attackers who would win.
Well, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Machine learning, if the person Google it, they will have a better understanding. So, I mean, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's unlikely that we would have the upper hand if we play that game.
Okay, well then, fair enough. Then let's just ask each of you in 20 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, because we are running out of time. Absolute maximum 20 seconds. Start with you, Pauline. What's the headline strategic things we need to do to respond to the threats and opportunities on this internet? Pauline first, please.
Make sure you have secure passwords and use two-factor authentication as an absolute minimum. If you do that, then you're going to protect the majority of your data. Also to train the people, because about 90% of attacks are successful because people allow them to happen, whether that's through email or other means. So again, it's back to people, I'm afraid.
And it's also very doable what you say. Gary, just 20 seconds, please. What are headline issues for you? What do we need to do? Companies need to do?
I'll go back to what I said before. Put security on the agenda before it becomes the agenda. Think of people, process, technology, cover those three aspects, and you'll do just fine.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And then finally, Victoria, final comment to you, 20 seconds. What's the headline things we should do?
And instead of labeling an environment such as the Darknet as criminogenic and its users as deviant others, a more holistic sociological understanding of the Darknet is needed.
Okay, how are we going to get that very briefly? Two or three words.
By sponsoring my research on the sociological structure of the Darknet and its participants.
That's fantastic, Victoria. On that note, we'll leave it with a chance to support Victoria's research. Thank you very much indeed. Fantastic conversation. We will be returning to this in future webinars. Just very few final comments from me very quickly, just to say the OSPAs around the world are active already for this year. South Africa, Kenya and Romania are got closing dates there. Still time in South Africa, but you've got to get your entries in quickly. South Africa, come on, get your entries in quickly. And on the 1st of April, we open in the United States. In the United States, OSPAs open 1st of April. Okay, let's move on to let you know our 100th webinar tomorrow, 100. And we've got 2 ex-offenders coming in. I've got to tell you this. One you would have known before, one you won't have done. They're prolific. They were in prison all their lives. They're coming out and commit more offences. You will find them articulate. You will find them very open and very willing to answer your questions. And they think there's real problems with the way security is practiced. They've been prolific. And although they've been to prison a lot, more often they've got away with it and they were successful. So join me tomorrow at 3:30 to hear why security doesn't work according to those who've spent a lifetime exploiting it. Absolutely fascinating. I promise you, you'll enjoy that. So once again, thank you very much indeed to you, the audience, for your questions. Thank you very much indeed to the panel for their insightful insights. Don't forget, a copy of a blog and a wrist recording will be on the website tomorrow. Wherever you are in the world, until we meet again, but I hope it's tomorrow at 3:30, stay safe.